I would like to tell you a little bit about our organization, which is the Union of the Baltic Cities. For some of you, it's probably already familiar, but our organization is, it was established in 1991. So we have about 32 cities. The 32 cities established the whole organization in 1991. So these countries included, I'm very sorry, I have to gather myself now. So anyway, we are one of the biggest city networks in the area. So at the moment we have around 90 member cities from 10 different countries. And our work is consistent of 7 different commissions. Our Sustainable Cities Commission is coordinated by our UBC Sustainability Action Program. And what we do is concrete sustainability actions. So we run different projects on our focus areas, which you can see here on the slide. So there are sustainability management, local climate work, water management, sustainable urban mobility, and integrated urban planning, and also energy efficiency. So our commission here in Turku is been hosted by the city of Turku since 1997. And our action program, which guides our actions, is running until 2021. So we still have a few years to go with that. And to go a little bit more to detail, here you can see which projects we are running at the moment. So we have around 11 different kinds of projects. Under water management, we have iWater, interactive water management, Ivama, Biasa Water, and with urban mobility, Civitas Eccentric sums up cities multimodal, Hub Mobile. With smart urban planning, it's Baltic Urban Lab and Skansti area, which is an area close to an area within the city of Turku. And with resource efficiency, we have Energy Smart Cities ECAT and Cascade, which we just started. And well, projects are not the only thing how we engage our member cities. We also arrange different kinds of events. We have workshops, we do capacity building, and also we arrange these kinds of webinars and different kinds of info events. So we try to do a lot. When it comes to our upcoming events, as I mentioned earlier, Ivama, our big project, will have its final conference here in Turku in January 31st. So there at the conference, they are sharing experiences of the project, results and the tools within Ivama. And also we will arrange more webinars, which will hopefully start on time and be a bit more consistent. But anyways, next February, we're planning on having a water related webinar. And also during this webinar, you get to have a little poll and vote what topics you would like to have webinars about, in case you're interested in joining in the future as well. You can also see our website address, so UBC sustainable.net, and our Facebook website, Facebook site. So please follow those. You can find more information about our events and webinars as well. So without any further delays, feel free also to contact us in case you have any ideas. We are always looking for new partners and looking for new ideas for projects that we could do in the future. So in case you have any thoughts, feel free to contact. You can find all our contact information on the website. And then a few words about these technical things, which seem to be a bit demanding today. So after each presentation, we will have a small slot for questions. There's two ways to ask questions. You can write them down on the chat, which you can find on the little sidebar, or you can sort of raise your hand, which means that you have this little button here on the sidebar as well, showing a picture of a hand. So if you click that, you can ask for your turn, and you can ask your question online through the microphone. And at the end of the webinar, we will also have a little poll. So then have a look at the sidebar over here so you can see what we're asking, and the poll is related to our future webinars. But now I will give the turn to our specialists. So first, we will have a presentation about integrated partnership-based planning of brownfield areas. And Maija Rusanen, our project coordinator from the UBC Sustainable Cities Commission, you're welcome.
So, good morning, everybody. So as Nuppu said, I will work as project coordinator here at UBC Sustainable Cities Commission. And for the past 3 years, I have been coordinating Baltic Urban Lab project, which is focusing on the development of brownfield areas. And today I will share a bit results from our project and one of the important output that we have produced during the project, which is this guide towards integrated and partnership-based planning of brownfield areas, which is a guide targeted to local authorities about planning brownfield areas in a more systematic way. So we all know that the working environment for cities has become more and more complex. We need to deal with challenges like climate change and energy transition, think about how the mobility system will change in our cities. And cooperation to solve these challenges is needed on different levels. Also, we need to move away from sector-based planning to integrated planning approach to address these challenges in order to think about the cities as a whole. So also not site-specific incentives, but focusing on larger areas in the cities and larger development projects which take into account the mobility and energy solutions, housing services as well. And we also need to plan the cities for people who are living in the cities and also with people. But the challenge for many cities is that we are lacking these integrated approaches and cooperation models, that how we could do it together with different actors in the society. And developing brownfields, it's one of the cornerstones of promoting sustainable development in our cities. And at the moment, it has been estimated there are around 3 million urban brownfields that could be regenerated. And EU has also set a goal of no net land take by 2050. So that is a quite big challenge, but it also an opportunity for the cities. Brownfield development is quite a complex process. It requires dealing with the past of the site and dealing with the contamination, but without losing the cultural and industrial heritage related to the site. But at the same time, it also requires planning for the future and how the site should be used like in 20 years, for example. And based on the discussion with different cities around the region, we have noticed that cities are very common or very similar challenges when it comes to brownfield development. the land ownership is often quite fragmented, and there are usually like very large amount of different stakeholders involved, like landowners, developers who would like to invest, citizens, of course, and companies acting in the area. And this is causing also that there is often lack of common development vision as well. And we should, of course, not forget about talking about the technical, geological, legal, and financial challenges when it actually comes to remediating the contaminated land. And we believe that close cooperation and partnerships between different actors is very important, especially in the brownfield development from the beginning of the planning process to tackle these key challenges. And due to the complex nature of brownfield development and the related quite high risks, it's very important to find from the beginning common understanding and commitment to the process between different actors that are involved. So therefore, the process should always start with an open dialogue involving different stakeholders as well as citizens in the planning. But often cities lack of methods and practices and previous experience how to engage these different actors in the planning process. And we have tried to deal with this in Baltic Urban Lab project, which is a 3-year project that how to actually support this more open, inclusive and efficient planning of the brownfield areas. And the aim has been to test integrated planning and partnerships models for the development of these 4 brownfield sites. And this has been done in practice in 4 pilot areas in Norrköping, Tallinn, Turku, and Riga. And they have tried to find together with the stakeholders a vision and development plan for the area and try to engage different actors better in the process by testing traditional engagement methods, but also very novel approaches. And based on the experiences in the project, we also wanted to share our experiences with other cities, and that's why we have prepared this guide, and it's very based on these practical experiences from this city pilot, but also a dialogue with other cities. And the guide demonstrates more integrated and systematic approach to planning of brownfield development, and it's focusing especially on the early stage of a development and planning process, and has the perspective of how to engage different stakeholders better in that. The guide also includes very concrete case examples and useful tools also for other local authorities who are tackling with the same challenges. And it's also, the guide is available in different languages. So of course the planning system and procedures as well as the organizational setup is different for each city, and of course each development process has also its own challenges and specific contexts, and as well as stakeholders. But we have identified that there are always in development process certain issues that should be taken into account. So we have gathered in this guide 10 crucial topics that should be considered in a brownfield planning process, so that these public-private people partnerships could be better supported and the planning process could be more open. And the guide has been divided in 2 sections. First is internal organization and preparation, so how to really within the city administration to get to organize the process. And then the second is focusing on really cooperating with different stakeholders. And there are several stages in both this soil remediation and regeneration process when we talk about how to really clean the contamination of the soil, as well as in this visioning and land use planning process when stakeholders could and should be involved in the process. Of course, their role and the benefits that can be gained from cooperation also varies from step to step, and we wanted to create these couple of very simplified illustration about the different steps in the process. So we have as well as well a process scheme for the visioning and land use planning process to show that it's a step by step, and there are different ways to involve stakeholders in each step. But then let's start with the first part. I will go quickly through these different topics that we have considered important in these places, but there is much more information in the guide itself, which can be found in our website. So if we want to plan these cities for people, different stakeholders and especially citizens should be involved in the planning process already from the beginning. When visions and strategic plans are made. But this is often a bit, cities are struggling how to involve different actors, especially in this quite abstract state of the planning process. There are yet not necessarily any plan proposals, but it's about like visioning how we would like to develop the site. But it would be still important to involve different actors also in that stage. But then also these kind of visions and strategies may have a bit unofficial or unclear status towards these statutory planning documents like detailed plan and master plan. So it's very important to define how are they guiding and how are these visions actually implemented. Also, it's important that the mandate and roles for participatory planning should be clear within the local administration, as well as the local administration would show itself commitment to the process and really implement these visions. And brownfield development projects are usually quite large processes and complex processes which require expertise and resources from different departments within the city. And breaking out from this sector-based planning. And it's important to consider how to organize this so that necessary actors would be on board, and especially who should take the lead of the process and who should be involved. As you can see in this picture, it's much more than urban planning expertise what is needed. There's also a needed expertise for communication and stakeholder involvement. So it would be very good to define clearly how these responsibilities are shared and how this whole process is organized and how the cooperation between different units are organized. And often it might be also a bit unclear what is really the vision from the city itself, that should be also clear. So we also have noticed that sometimes it would be good to do these co-creation workshops also within the city and between different departments to get really the unified vision for the development. And then it is very important, especially when you start the brownfield development process, to know really the starting point for the planning and the basic facts of the site. And it's actually good to involve already internal and external stakeholders to prepare this baseline analysis and utilize their knowledge better. And it also helps to baseline analysis also helps to integrate the process with other strategies, plan and process, and may reveal potential conflicting issues as well. And as mentioned before, in brownfield development, it's especially important to have this common understanding on the starting point and potential, and also common understanding on the risks. Therefore, it's also very important to perform risk analysis, especially when we talk about brownfield development, which is a very, very long-term process and also involves like quite high financial and environmental risks. But besides these risks, it would be also good to analyze what kind of risks there might be related to participation and cooperation and management and coordination, or for example, weak political leadership. And then also think about already beforehand how to handle if these risks occur. And the well planned is already half done. Rule could be and should be applied to any urban development process. So it's very important to have an action plan for the process, which gives the overall picture of the process. It also helps to clarify the goals and steps with all involved stakeholders, as well internally within the city, but also with other stakeholders outside of the city organization. And we have noticed that visualizing the process and these different steps is really important, and this is what our cities learned during the process. And outlining these different steps also helps to identify when stakeholders should and could be involved. And also it helps to define the needed resources and responsibilities. And many of these things included in the action plan, what we propose to include, are explained also in this guideline. Then after organizing internally and setting up the structure for the project, it's important to think like how to really cooperate with the stakeholders and how to engage them planning the brownfield areas. And it is, of course, important to know who are the stakeholders in the process. So stakeholder analysis should produce a comprehensive list of stakeholders and categorize them like according to key variable. For example, are they core, primary, or secondary stakeholders? What is their connection to the site, and what is the activity status and level of effect? And performing stakeholder analysis helps to really identify these different types of stakeholders, as well as then later to choose the best ways to recruit them to the process, but also to gain knowledge how to handle these power imbalances between different stakeholders, because of course private stakeholders have a bit different power than citizens in the process. And this should be also carried out alongside the baseline analysis. After the stakeholders have been identified, it's easier to select the methods and tools for stakeholder involvement. And of course, working with private stakeholders like developers or landowners requires a bit different kind of approaches than working with citizens, because usually those who are least used about this, have least experience about planning processes, need then a bit more support to actually participate. So we suggest that variety of different involvement platforms and forums and methods should be needed, and those should be of course selected according to the target group. In this guide we have collected a lot of different examples about traditional or digital ways to engage stakeholders and cooperate with them, and many of these have been tested in practice in our member cities or in other cities. And what is also worth to mention, it's always also really important to publish and communicate openly, like what is the outcome of these different activities that are then carried out. And communication is really a cornerstone of every development process, but it's also unfortunately easily forgotten activity. But it should be a continuous task throughout the planning process to create openness about the planning and really tell people what is going on and in which states we are at the moment. And good communication creates basis for cooperation and supports the creation of trust and commitment between involved parties. And as any other activity, communication is also something that should be really planned. Like, who are the target groups in communication and what are the key messages to each target group, and how frequent the communication should be, and like through with what kind of channels the communication should take place, and as well as the responsibilities in this case. So it's very important to also plan communication. And I think this was something based on the experiences of our cities that it's sometimes like really forgotten, that not enough resources are allocated to the communication. And when stakeholder analysis has been done and necessary tools and forms have been identified, and communication plan has been prepared, it would be good to do a stakeholder involvement plan, which is then tells like what kind of activities should take place and when. But the mandate should be, before starting the involvement activities, the mandate should be clear, as well as there is enough competence to really work with the stakeholders, because it's, for example, it's not always a skill of an, for example, of an urban planner, that they should like know how to do that and what kind of methods to use. And also there should be enough resources to do that, because we all know that it is quite time consuming and needs also resources. And then of course the goal should be clear. Why do we want to cooperate with different actors, as well as then the stakeholder analysis then, as well as how much influence these different activities will then have really in the decision making process and in the actual plans. Then when it comes to implementation, the tools should be selected, and then the place and timing should be decided, as well as the analytical framework, how these results of these different activities will be analyzed. And then, of course, after these activities have taken place, analysis, feedback, and evaluation should take place. And as mentioned before, it's very important to communicate about the results of these activities. If information has been collected from citizens or other stakeholders, they should also be able to know how does it actually influence the plans, or does it influence. So transparency is really one of the main pillars for individuals and groups to be actually able to participate in planning, because they cannot participate or give their opinion about something that they don't know anything. So all of these activities like stakeholder analysis, stakeholder identification, recognizing these different types of stakeholders and selecting the right forums, and especially communication supports transparent planning. But it's good to keep in mind that always be clear and transparent about how these inputs are used and how they impact about the plans or the planning of the specific site, or whether they don't impact. And as private actors often own quite a lot of land in the brownfield areas, and they have like quite a lot of influence on the planning. So it should be the responsibility of public planning departments to ensure that also the public opinion is heard in the planning processes, and that economic values do not overcome the social values in the process. And we believe that taking all these voices into account gives better ground for planning for all. So actually planning the cities for people and the users. And in the end of the presentation, I would just like to share a couple of case examples how these different steps have been put in practice in real life development cases. So in our project City of Tallinn planned the regeneration of Skåne activity belt together with the stakeholders. So their aim in the process was to better engage different citizens and other stakeholders in planning. And they started the activities already in the idea gathering phase, and when they did SWOT analysis and this baseline analysis about the site. So they started really early on the process to cooperate with stakeholders. And Tallinn followed the step-by-step approach for developing the plan, that they always, like after plan draft, they discussed and presented the results to stakeholders, and then different actors had a possibility to comment, and then these were taken into account in the plans. And they use like different tools like participatory mobile app Avalin or GIS platforms, and organized series of workshops and cooperated with universities. And the result was agreement on the next steps and short and long-term goals for the revitalization of Skåne activity belt. And in Turku's case, the pilot was to co-create vision and master plan for Turku Science Park area. So 2 parallel collaboration processes took place. First of all, the planning for the future development of this Itä-Harju brownfield site, which is included in this wider Turku Science Park area with key actors and other stakeholders. So really develop the vision in cooperation with the variety of actors. But at the same time, there was the planning, the transformation of the current brownfield site and how the soil should be cleaned. And this was done also in cooperation with landowners and current users of the site, so that they are also informed what will happen in the site. And preparing this kind of vision and unofficial master plan for the area was in this broad cooperation with different stakeholders, and this opening was a new experience for the city. And during the process, different methods were used, like series of workshops were organized, and Turku launched this Turku Future Forum approach, which is a co-creation platform, and then also landowners and leaseholders forums were organized and hackathons as well. So a variety of different methods were used. So the end result of this process was a vision and a master plan for the Science Park area, which was approved by the City Council as guideline for further steps in the planning process. But more inspiration and these practical case examples from our cities and other cities you can find from our website. We have also published report on these different kind of stakeholder involvement methods that cities have been using. But please go and check our website. There you find like a lot of more information, especially useful for local authorities. But I hope you will find our guide interesting, and I think there will be some time for questions now if you have any questions, but you're also free to contact me afterwards. So thank you.
Thank you, Maija, very much for your enlightening presentation. Are there any questions to Maija? Feel free to ask via chat or raise your hand so we can give you the microphone. In case there aren't any at the moment, you can also ask at the end of all the sessions. So next, in case there are no questions, apparently no. So next we have Pilar telling us a little about blue-green factor. So she will be presenting us a practical tool for urban planning in Turku. So Pilar, you're free to go.
Okay, can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. Hi everybody. Well, my name is Pilar Meseguer. I have been the iWater project coordinator in the city of Turku till May this year. Now I am working also in the city of Turku as a building control officer, and I'm seeing how is this tool that I'm going to explain you working in the city. Well, let's see. This blue-green factor, we developed it in iWater. We had some objectives for this tool. It comes from a green factor or green area factor. It has been used in many cities, and the objective of this green factor, it was to encourage the use of vegetation. We call it in Turku blue-green factor because we are trying to also retain or detain stormwater in private courtyards. So we are using also for that. And the second main, how is it? Okay. Yeah. Well, I had some pictures telling you what it meant, but the objective was to have less of these impervious surfaces and more green in the courtyards. That was the first main objective of this tool. And the second one was linking the urban planning and building control processes. And to explain this, I have to explain a little bit about the integrated stormwater management. What is it? I'm going to show you a flow sequence. It means a stormwater runoff flow sequence, which is quite easy to understand how this integrated stormwater management works. Well, first we have to use preventive measures. These are like decisions that we make at the planning level to reduce the amount of runoff that it's appearing in an area. And then we try to control the excedent runoff in the place where it's appearing, the runoff. So we use small source controls, for instance, in courtyards, inside the plots. And finally, we have the large structural controls that we use in public areas at the urban level. I'm going to give some examples of each of these three groups, but when we talk about integrated stormwater management, it means that we are using all these three groups at the same time, not just one of them. So preventive measures, as I said before, they are decisions that we made at urban planning level. For instance, this, you have on the left some kind of planning that was not taking into account the stormwater, and the arrows are showing the amount of stormwater that it's discharged probably to the sea or to the river. And on the right, you can see that just changing the distribution of the buildings and the streets and the green areas, you can reduce the amount of stormwater. And how do you do it? Well, for instance, you can avoid imperviousness on steep slopes, as you can see here, trying to keep undisturbed vegetation on slopes and build on areas that are not steep slopes. Reducing the impervious surfaces. You can, in residential areas, use narrow streets, and this is also a traffic calming feature, as you can read on the right here, which also keeps more silent residential areas. And very important, it's to disconnect these impervious surfaces, because with the same amount of impervious surfaces in an area, if they are connected, they are producing large or more amount of stormwater flows, and they are also, the speed of these stormwater flows, it's higher, so they are more, they have more erosive power. The next step was the small source controls inside plots. I'm just going to give one example. This is a small pond in a courtyard in Augustenborg in Malmö. And then finally, we have the large structural controls at the urban level. This is another example from Stockholm. And you can see this is a long and large park that with a kind of inclination, it's collecting the stormwater in this area. This is permanent water retention basin, but the level can grow with extreme rainfalls. So now I'm going to explain the design sequence. I was explaining this stormwater runoff flow sequence, which is quite logical, but the design sequence, it's a little bit different. We start with urban planning. At the urban planning department, we can use this kind of preventive measures when we are planning our areas. But then the next step is larger structural controls design. And this is made, for instance, in public areas design departments. And finally, we have the small source controls designs that we do in the private lots. And this is something that in the city, the building control department, it's taking care of the design of these small source controls. But as you can see, we have a kind of gap between urban planning and building control. And the idea was to fill this gap with a blue-green factor. And how we made this? Well, the solution that we found is that we can use the building regulations that are coming with the detailed planning. So when we are designing an area and we are planning it, we can make this kind of requirements for the buildings that they are going to be built in the private areas. And this is called for instance, like building regulations in Finnish. I don't know if the translation is correct to English because I couldn't find any good translation. But we have been using 3 for this blue-green factor, minimum green area, green factor, and in Finnish would be huulesata, but in English would be a kind of blue factor. I'm going to show you first how it looks, this tool. This is the first is the information plot sheet, and you just fill the information here, like the address and all kind of information about the private lot. And then we have here this kind of building regulations that I was presenting you in the PowerPoint. The next step is to fill in the blue-green factor. Here, the blue-green factor sheet with the information here in this column about the green areas. And finally, you just have to print in PDF or in paper to send it to the building control department when you are looking for a building permit. This solution, the solution sheet. So I think can I come just back to the PowerPoint? I think it's this one. Is it like this? I think it's okay. Yeah, okay, thank you. So coming back to the PowerPoint, now that you could see the toolbox, which is just an Excel calculation sheet. We have this plot information sheet, and as I was showing you, we put here, we fill in with the minimum green area, the blue factor, and the green factor. The minimum green area, I'm going to explain you where these building regulations are coming from. How are they calculated during the detailed planning development? So the minimum green area comes from, I'm showing you now our pilot site in Iwater here in Turku is Kirstinpuisto, and this area was developed with this kind of large structural stormwater control. Here in the middle, it's similar to the one that I was showing you from Stockholm. It's a long or longitudinal green area or park that it can collect stormwater because it's inclinated, this area, and it can have this kind of stormwater collection here. So when we were making the hydrological calculations, the engineer asked me for how much, what was the percentage that in the private areas would be permeable. This is something that we don't know right now. We have to take as an assumption for the calculations. And I was seeing that this could be a kind of risk, because if we don't, if later when we are building and developing these private areas, if we are not taking this kind of minimum permeable area, it's going to be like a risk because then these areas would be undersized for the stormwater collection. So that's why we had to put a kind of minimum green area or minimum permeable area as a building regulation for this pilot site. And we hope that we can continue to use it later in other development areas. The green factor is going to be calculated using also a kind of model building block, where we ask a landscape architect to develop this kind of model building block, make a design using at least 35% of the private lot as permeable. And she made this kind of design. And then we asked her if she could calculate the different green elements that she was using, or the landscape elements, and giving us an amount, well, the area of these elements that were used in the design. When we had this list here, we could test it in our blue-green factor sheet and see how much this model building block was scoring for the green factor. This way we could set the green factor for the pilot site as 1, as you can see here. And finally, this blue factor that we call Hulesata is just one. It's a factor that it was already used in some developing areas in Turku, and it's a mandatory 1 cubic meter per 100 square meters of impervious surface in the plot should be retained in the plot. You just fill this with the number. It could be also half cubic meter or probably 1.5 cubic meters, but right now we just have 1. And then it automatically calculates how much cubic meters you have to retain in your plot, depending on what you were filling here in the column of the green elements. You can see here that there is a cell that you cannot fill. It's automatically calculated, and it's the impervious surface of the plot. And based on this, the required amount of cubic meters should be 18.69 and not 10.77. And it's due to this runoff factor that it's calculated for the whole plot. The more green you use in this column, or green elements that you put in this column, the smaller is this green factor, and it's multiplied for this amount, so that you can reduce this way. Just using more vegetation in your courtyard, you can reduce the amount of stone water that you have to retain in your plot. And then I can finally show you also the minimum green area here. It's also calculated the required, and the one that has been reached by the plot, and the green factor required level. Well, that was all. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you very much, Pilar. Do you have any questions? Our chat is open all the time, so feel free to. Okay. I think we have one question. Just a moment. So we have a question, and it goes, is this method applicable for other cities as well?
Well, it depends on what kind of system you have in your city, because if you have detailed planning, and if you are using building regulations in your detailed planning, I think you can use it also in your city. I don't know if I answered the question, or do you need more information about it?
Thank you, Pilar. Apparently, answer was very good, so thank you. Are there any other questions? You can also present questions from Maya if something came onto your mind. In case not, feel free to save your questions after all the presentations as well. And now we can move to our third presentation. So we have Agnieszka telling us a little about integrated stormwater management toolbox. So, Agnieszka, you're welcome.
Okay, hello. Hello everyone. I think now everyone can hear me. And I will just fast check. Can you see the presentation as well? Yes. Hello everyone on my behalf. My name is Agnieszka Ilola and I'm working at Union of the Baltic Cities Sustainable Cities Commission as project coordinator. And today in this webinar, I'm going to present to you the integrated stormwater management toolbox, which was developed in the iWater project. And before I will go to the toolbox, I would like to tell you a couple of words about the iWater project. So the project was dealing with the stormwater management, with the integrated stormwater management, and the main aims of the project were to improve the urban planning and through development of the multifunctional stormwater management in the 7 partner cities. And we also developed a new stormwater planning tools together with the cities. And secondly, the aim was to create a higher quality and more resilient urban spaces through finding, piloting, and disseminating innovations in urban stormwater management. And the last but not least, we were hoping through all our actions to decrease also the future costs of the urban flooding. And the project was implemented from December 2015 to May 2018. So we are now already ready to share with you all the results of the project. And the green-blue factor that was presented by Pilar before is also one of the main results of this iWater project. We had the 7 partner cities, which I mentioned before, and those cities were Turku and Helsinki. We had Riga, Jelgava, Tartu, and 2 cities from Stockholm. It was Gävle and Söderhamn. Our academic partner was Aalto University from Helsinki, and of course we had the Union of the Baltic Cities responsible for capacity building and the communication in the project. The project was of a special importance for the European Union strategy for the Baltic Sea region, and it was granted a flagship status from the Horizontal Action Climate. And here you can see a little bit also other results which I mentioned. So the green factor tool that was explained a bit, or the local adaptation was explained by Pilar. So you will find, if you're really interested in how other cities implemented and tested this tool, please also visit our iWater website, because you will find there the section with local adaptations. So you will see how the city of Helsinki is using that tool, or our Swedish cities, or how the tool was adapted and modified, for example, in Riga, Latvia. Apart from the green area factor tool, we have also created this integrated stormwater management toolbox, which I'm going to explain you a little bit more in the details in a couple of minutes. But we also have had very interesting pilots on multifunctional stormwater solutions, and those could be also found on our website. So, for example, the city of Helsinki have developed an stormwater filtration unit, and this is very interesting. I think you might be interested to check it out. And we also have implemented in each of our cities either they created the new integrated stormwater management programs, or updated, in the case of Turku and Helsinki, already existing ones. And all the lessons learned and experiences from that process we included in the integrated stormwater management guidelines, which has 12 annexes with ready-to-use tools and sheets. So I very warmly recommend you to visit the iWater website to see all the results. But now I will focus only on the iWater toolbox. So the toolbox was created during the iWater project, and it is openly available at www.integratedstormwater.eu/toolbox. And it looks like on the picture, so it's a kind of a virtual table where you can click on the different sections. And the structure of the toolbox is, as you can see, structured in two ways. We use the colors for different sections, and we use the structural features. But firstly, the toolbox is targeted at the landscape architects and urban planners and designers, as well as those who are working with stormwater management issues in the cities and would like to develop it further. So also the ones that are working with design, planning, or the management of the stormwaters. And the tools that you will find in this toolbox are partially the new tools that we have developed in the project, but also the tools that have been existing before, but we find them crucial or very effective and important in when we are considering the integrated stormwater management development process in the city. So the approach in the toolbox assumes the necessary integration of the stormwater management into urban planning and development processes at all levels, from the strategy and master planning phase to the implementation phase. And it takes into account also the solutions that are suitable, especially for the northern climate conditions. When we look at the table, so we altogether combine 17 different tools, and we have two different categorization methods used in this toolbox. So firstly, the tools are categorized according to the levels in which planning or design phase those tools are applied, and those are the ones that are here marked with the colors, and these are indicated by the different colors in the toolsheet, and these are strategic approaches and planning support tools and programs, design and structural solutions, and the assessment tools. And then secondly, we have organized the tools in the 3-point method, which you can see here on the top. So those are marked by the drops. And here you can see urban resilience section, technical optimization, and day-to-day values. These are marked with the drops. So when you go to each case under this section, you will also find the respective section and respective drop, so you know about in which kind of conditions this tool could be implemented. Let me move further on. So when we are talking about this 3-point approach, so we have here the technical optimization, and those solutions or tools deal with the defined so-called designed rainfall in order to meet the locally defined service levels. And these tools are used in rather a traditional drainage network design when there is a certain measures of rain events on a certain lifespan. So for example, once in 10 years, and based on the capacity and the capacity of the network is designed exactly to take care of this sort of rain events. And under that you will find some under that section you will find some useful tools that fall under this technical optimization, and those could be used even with a bit more sustainable approach to stormwater management. So here, for example, you will find the green infrastructure audit. You will find here the runoff coefficient calculation, or watershed assessment, or sustainable urban drainage systems. And when sometimes when we are facing already now the climate change and more intense rain events, we need more urban resilience approach to mitigate these effects and of the possible extreme rains, and as well as, of course, creating the technical basis for adaptation to structure changing scenarios. So in urban resilience section, you will find the tools, specific tools supporting the resilience approach. And here we have the, for example, cloud burst management plan, flood risk mapping, or LEED certification. And when we think about the resource and the way to create recreational values and ecological values in urban conditions, then you want to see the day-to-day values and the specific tools for that. So these tools aim at delivering multiple ecosystem services and need to be incorporated into the daily functioning of the urban spaces in order to be successful. So here, for example, you will find the tools as living waterways rating tool, and then mentioned by Pilar, green area factor tool, and then best management practices, for example. When we look at the categorization, so here under the different categories, you will find the tools such as, for example, strategic approaches and planning supporting tools. And those aim rather to manage the people's behavior rather than the large infrastructure's assets. And these are intended to protect the quality and limit the quantity of the urban runoff. And they include the planning, education, and regulation actions. These tools work as the preventive measures, so they are used rather before the runoff appears. And here you can find the tools such as water-sensitive urban design, or low-impact development, or green infrastructure and ecosystem services, and then the issues related to education and engagement in your city, just to mention a few. And in the planning supporting tools and programs, you will find the green infrastructure audit and green area factor tool, for example, that was presented earlier by Pilar. Then in the section design structural solutions, there are concrete structures that involve already the constructions and moving of the earth and planting vegetation to reduce or delay the stormwater flow. And also to some extent they remove the pollutants. So structural solutions are measures used rather after the runoff appears. And here you can find the detailed descriptions of 16 different solutions, including, for example, the green streets and green roofs, green walls and bioswales, detention basin and rain gardens, as well as many others. Because during the iWater project, we realized that, for example, sometimes when we talk about different green structures like rain gardens or swale or the detention basins, it was not always clear what are the differences between those different structures. And in the last section, marked as brown, you will find the assessment tools, which includes the evaluation criteria for stormwater management and solutions and cost-benefit analysis and analysis of the ecosystem services for suitable stormwater solutions. So now I'm going to give you a couple of examples on how does the content and the description of the certain tools looks like when you click on it. You will see the content card, and for example, in the section assessment, you will see that it applies to all three. You will see that the whole three different drops, so it applies on the all way of creating your integrated stormwater planning. And in this assessment criteria sheets, you will find 6 different cards where you can assess the quality of your multifunctional stormwater solutions. And here you can
find the questions regarding to your site, for example, whether it's an innovative or is it a multifunctional. And in order to evaluate this, you will find a set of helping you questions. And in this 6 different checklists, you will find the visuality, quality assessment, and assessment in the context of technical and economical feasibilities, as well as in the context of ecosystem services or climate change adaptation. When we take an example from design structural solutions, for example, you will find, as I mentioned here, 16 different green structure solutions. And when you go further, you will find the concrete description on how to recognize the specific solution, what are the characteristics, what are the cost benefit ratio, and preconditions for implementation of this specific solution. Here is another example, for example, of the green street as the structural solution. And yes, that was it on my behalf. I very warmly recommend you to visit the toolbox and see what solutions we have gathered for you, and as well as, of course, visiting the iWater project website for even more interesting concrete tools. I hope those will be useful for you. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Agnieszka, for your presentation. And now we have some time for questions and discussion in general. So please feel free to ask any questions or share any thoughts via chat, or just raise your hand and we can open your microphone and you can ask personally.
Perhaps I could also add that since we have the international audience, and you might be interested also in the local translations into local languages. So in iWater project, we do have maybe not all the results, but most of the tools that we have presented translated to Latvian, Swedish, Estonian, and Finnish. So that's just to add on.
Yes, thank you. Are there any thoughts or feedback? You can also give that, so feel free. In case there are no... Oh, hello.
Hello, this is Christina, and I would like to ask you about if you also point out what kind of green solutions the stakeholders like the most. Like, did the local people like the green roofs, or were there any other methods that you think that made the living environment better in terms of the enjoyability of the people?
Thank you, Christina. So, is Agnieszka willing to answer, or?
Oh, sorry, I somehow didn't hear. We are in the same room. I heard the echo. It was hard. You were asking, was the question to me about the iWater? How we did it in iWater, or? Actually, in iWater project we have created, as I was mentioning, this integrated stormwater management guidelines, and there we have one section dedicated to the stakeholder involvement and citizens involvement. It's a part partially, if I now can connect it to the toolbox. So partially in the toolbox, it's in the first section where we find this education and awareness raising solutions, tools, or the approaches, but also you can find some specific methods of how to involve your stakeholders and how to discuss the issues in the guidelines. So yes, we have considered the involvement of different target groups in the process. Will this answer your question, or I might be a miss?
Thank you, Aga. That was sufficient answer enough, or does Christina have other questions? Okay, so this was. Do we have any other questions? The previous answer was good enough, so we can continue. Please feel free to also send email to our presenters in case you want to ask any questions later on. Also, feel free to contact us here at the UBC Sustainable Cities Commission. You can find our contact details from our website. But we still have... Oh yes, we have a poll actually, which we didn't present yet. So I think we could have that one now. So our poll is now visible on your sidebar. So we are collecting responses to get to know what kind of webinars you would like us to arrange in the future. So our options are urban planning, sustainable urban mobility, water, climate change, and something different. And then there you can indicate what kind of thematics you would like us to focus on. So at the moment, urban planning and sustainable urban mobility are even, and now urban planning is a bit winning. Oh, and climate change, 60% of the votes at the moment. Very good. And in case you have any ideas, please also feel free to share your thoughts and ideas with us later on as well. So yeah, our poll says that climate change is the topic that our listeners would like to hear more about. So we were planning to have one webinar around February about water topics. So maybe we should also arrange, according to the poll, another webinar on climate change issues as well. So thank you very much for all of you who voted. And now is the final call for any questions or thoughts. In case there are none, I would like to thank you all very much for attending, and please join us again for our next webinars. We will announce them on our website and on our Facebook site. So thank you very much and have a nice week.